As the world above ground descended into chaos, Lara's mind raced with the implications of what she had just witnessed. The tremors weren't natural. The symbols, the ancient tunnels, and the dark energy that had erupted, none of it was a coincidence. The Earth had been hiding something for centuries, and whatever it was, it had just awakened. But why? What had triggered this awakening? The glowing light from the depths continued to pulsate beneath her feet, growing brighter and more intense. It wasn't just an odd energy, it was alive, like something out of a nightmare. Lara's breath hitched as she realized the magnitude of what had just transpired. The destruction they'd witnessed above ground was only the beginning. Something far worse was looming, and she had no idea how to stop it. Around her, the once tranquil desert landscape had transformed into a scene of utter devastation. The ground was shifting, cracking open in jagged lines, and strange geysers of steam shot into the sky. The air felt thick with the energy that now pulsed from the Earth's core, a hum that seemed to reverberate deep within Lara's bones. Her team members were still scattered, some groaning as they tried to recover from the shockwave. She hurriedly gathered them together, her thoughts whirling as she assessed the situation. "We need to move. Now!" Lara commanded, her voice sharp. But no one seemed to be listening. They were all too stunned, too terrified to comprehend what had just happened. But then, out of the corner of her eye, Lara saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure stood at the edge of the crack in the earth, a tall, shadowy figure whose presence seemed to exude power and menace. It wasn't human. No, this was something else, something ancient. The figure's eyes glowed with an eerie light, as if it were drawn to the energy that had been released from the depths. Lara's pulse quickened as the figure stepped forward, its form becoming more distinct. The figure was cloaked in flowing robes that shimmered with the same glowing energy, and its face was obscured by a hood. It moved with a strange grace, like a being who had walked the earth long before humanity ever existed. There was no doubt in her mind, it was here because of what they had uncovered. "Who? What are you?" Lara whispered, though she wasn't sure if she even wanted an answer. The figure stopped, its gaze fixed on her. The hum of the energy seemed to quiet for a brief moment, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Then, in a voice that sounded like it had echoed through the ages, it spoke. "You have awoken something you were never meant to find," the figure said, its voice chilling yet oddly familiar. "Now, the earth will pay the price." Lara's heart pounded in her chest. The figure's words sent a ripple of fear through her body, but she didn't dare look away. She had to understand, she had to know what was happening. "Why now? Why was this hidden?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The figure paused, as if considering the question. Finally, it replied, "Because humanity is not ready. You are not ready. What was hidden beneath your feet was never meant for your eyes. And now, the consequences are inevitable." Before Lara could respond, the earth beneath her feet trembled once more, this time with far greater intensity. The crack in the ground widened, sending a shockwave of energy outward. Lara's body was jolted backward, and she barely managed to catch herself before tumbling into the abyss. "We need to get back to the surface," one of her team members yelled, but it was already too late. The tunnels were no longer safe. The very foundation of the earth seemed to be tearing itself apart, as though it were resisting the very presence of humans in its depths. Lara turned toward the figure, desperation in her eyes. "Tell us how to stop this. We can fix it." The figure's gaze softened, almost pitying, and it spoke its final words before disappearing into the energy-filled mist. "There is no stopping it now. What has been set in motion cannot be undone. You will learn in time. But be warned, some truths are better left buried." And just like that, the figure vanished, leaving only a lingering feeling of dread in its wake. The glowing energy surged once more, and the ground shook violently. Lara and her team had no choice but to flee, but they knew, deep down, that no matter how fast they ran, the world had already changed. And the worst was yet to come. Lara's mind raced as she climbed back to the surface, her heart hammering in her chest. She had seen too much. The figure, the warning, the eerie energy, it was all connected, and there was no escaping it now. As the team regrouped, the sky above them darkened, as if the planet itself was reacting to what had been unleashed beneath. The once bright desert landscape was now marred by swirling, unnatural clouds that twisted into ominous shapes. Strange creatures began to emerge from the cracks in the earth, their movements erratic, as though they too were trying to adjust to the new world. Lara knew they had to act fast, but with each passing moment, the situation was becoming more and more desperate. The deadly secrets that the Earth had hidden for centuries were now out in the open, and humanity was about to face the consequences of their curiosity. But what could they do? The figure had been clear, there was no stopping this. Yet, Lara couldn't help but wonder, if there was no hope, why had the figure spoken to them at all? Why had it warned them? The answer, she knew, lay beneath the earth, in the very tunnels they had uncovered. And it was there that they would have to go again, back into the heart of the storm, to find the truth and perhaps, just perhaps, a way to undo the damage they had caused. But time was running out, and the Earth's deadly secrets had only just begun to reveal themselves. Lara's mind churned as she paced back and forth, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The figure's cryptic words echoed in her mind. Some truths are better left buried. Was it really too late? Could the Earth's destruction be reversed, or were they doomed to face the consequences of their own curiosity? The team had managed to regroup, but the sense of urgency was palpable. It was only a matter of time before the forces beneath the Earth continued to escalate, and they needed to find out what had truly been awakened. "How are we supposed to stop this?" one of her team members, Mark, asked, his voice filled with disbelief and fear. The figure said there's no way back, but that can't be true, right? We have to do something. Lara clenched her fists. We have to find out what it is, she said, her voice steady but filled with a determination she barely felt herself. That's the only way we can figure out if there's any chance of stopping it. But the longer they stood there, looking at the ominous sky swirling above them, the more Lara began to realize that what they were dealing with was far beyond their understanding. Earth was no longer just a planet, it was a battleground between forces they couldn't comprehend. The ancient energy that had erupted from the depths was alive, and it was pulling at the fabric of reality itself. Suddenly, a flash of bright light broke through the storm clouds, temporarily blinding Lara and her team. They shielded their eyes, squinting against the glare as something shifted in the distance. What had once been a calm desert landscape was now unrecognizable, with cracks in the earth spreading like veins of an ancient, dying creature. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with life, undulating as though something was moving far beneath them. "We need to go back," Lara said, her voice low. "We need to return to the tunnels." The rest of the team exchanged uneasy glances. The tunnels were dangerous now, filled with unknown dangers that could swallow them whole. But if there was any hope of understanding what had triggered this catastrophe, they would have to go back to where it all began. "Lara, are you sure?" Mark asked. The figure said there was no stopping this. "What if?" "We don't have a choice," she interrupted, her eyes scanning the shifting landscape around them. "If we want answers, if we want any chance of survival, we have to face whatever's down there." Reluctantly, the team nodded in agreement. They had no other option. The journey back to the tunnels was tense. The once familiar desert now felt foreign, as though the earth itself had turned against them. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and the ground seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Every step felt like a risk, and Lara couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The creatures that had begun to emerge from the earth were unlike anything they had seen before, twisted, alien forms that slithered and crawled in the cracks of the ground. But they pressed on. When they finally reached the entrance to the tunnels, Lara felt a chill crawl up her spine. The entrance, which had once been merely a darkened cave, was now surrounded by a strange, glowing aura that seemed to shimmer in the air. The energy from the depths of the earth was emanating from within, pulsing like a heartbeat. It was calling to them, drawing them in. As they stepped into the cave, Lara's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The tunnels, which had once seemed like a maze of curiosity, now felt like a labyrinth of dread. The walls seemed to shift, almost imperceptibly, as though the tunnel itself was alive and aware of their presence. "We need to move quickly," Lara urged, her voice tight. She knew they couldn't afford to linger here for long. The energy from the depths was growing stronger with every passing second. The tunnels were becoming unstable, and the danger was escalating. They navigated through the winding passages, their footsteps echoing off the damp stone walls. It was eerily silent, save for the occasional rumble from deep within the earth. As they ventured deeper, Lara couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Whatever lay ahead, it was not going to be easy. As they neared the heart of the tunnels, a sudden tremor shook the ground. The walls cracked, and the ceiling above them began to crumble. Dust and debris rained down, forcing them to duck and cover. Lara barely managed to keep her footing as the ground beneath her shifted violently. "Get to cover," she shouted, but it was too late. A massive crack tore open in the floor ahead of them, sending a shockwave of energy rippling through the tunnel. From within the crack, a deep, guttural growl echoed, sending a wave of terror through the group. Lara's heart pounded as she looked around. They had to act fast. If they didn't, they would be swallowed by whatever was emerging from the depths. "We need to find the source of this energy," Lara shouted, trying to push past the fear that gripped her heart. But before anyone could respond, a shape emerged from the crack in the earth. X. It was huge, at least 10 feet tall, its body covered in scales that shimmered in the dim light. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural, fiery intensity, and its mouth was filled with rows of sharp, jagged teeth. It was a creature unlike anything Lara had ever seen, a monstrous force from the very heart of the earth. "Run!" Mark screamed, but there was nowhere to go. The creature blocked the only exit, and the ground continued to shake as more cracks formed in the earth. More creatures were emerging, each more terrifying than the last. Lara felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. They were too far in to escape now. The creatures were closing in, and the energy from the depths was overwhelming. There was no turning back. But in the midst of the chaos, Lara realized something. She hadn't come all this way just to run. They couldn't let fear control them. They had to fight. There had to be a way to stop the creature, to stop whatever was causing this destruction. There must be a way to contain it. The creature, towering over them, released a guttural roar that reverberated through the tunnels. The very air seemed to quiver with the sound, and Lara felt a chill run down her spine. She gripped her weapon tightly, trying to steady her breath. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a battle for the fate of the earth itself. "Move," she shouted, and without hesitation, her team scattered, each person taking cover behind the jagged stone walls of the tunnel. The creature lunged forward with terrifying speed, its claws raking across the ground, sending debris flying in every direction. Lara's mind raced. The creature was clearly not of this world, its scales shimmered like metal, its eyes glowing with a deep, fiery light. But what truly sent a wave of dread through her was the sense that it wasn't alone. She could feel something shifting in the earth around her, as if the very ground was alive with energy. "We need to stop it," Mark said, his voice shaky but resolute. "Lara, how do we kill this thing?" "I don't know," she replied, her eyes scanning the room for any advantage. "But we're going to have to find out. Fast." The creature lunged again, its jaws snapping shut with a sickening crack just inches from Lara. She ducked, narrowly avoiding its attack, and fired a round from her weapon. The shot hit its scales, but it did little more than anger the creature. It growled, its gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. "We're going to need more firepower," Lara muttered. "Retreat to the chamber. We'll make our stand there." The team began to fall back, but the creature pursued them relentlessly, its massive form crashing through the tunnel behind them. The ground continued to shake, cracks spreading wider with each step it took. Lara's heart pounded in her chest, the urgency of their situation pressing in on all sides. The creature was too powerful, too destructive. If they didn't come up with a plan soon, they were finished. As they reached a larger chamber deeper in the tunnels, Lara and her team took cover behind large rocks and stalagmites. The creature paused at the entrance, its glowing eyes searching for its prey. It had cornered them. Mark looked at Lara with fear in his eyes. "What now?" Lara didn't answer immediately. She was focused, calculating her next move. In the distance, there was a faint glow coming from a structure she hadn't noticed before, a strange, ancient altar that seemed to pulse with the same energy as the creature. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. "Cover me," she said, her voice low and steady. Without waiting for a response, Lara sprinted toward the altar, her footsteps muffled by the deep hum of the energy surrounding her. As she approached the structure, the glow intensified, and she could feel the power coursing through the air. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. The creature, sensing her movement, roared and charged toward her, its massive body shaking the ground beneath it. But Lara wasn't looking for a fight, she was looking for a solution. The altar was unlike anything she'd seen before. It was covered in ancient symbols, glowing faintly as though it had been dormant for centuries. As she reached it, Lara knelt beside it, her hands trembling as she traced the symbols with her fingers. They were alien, but they felt familiar, like a connection to the very heart of the earth. "Lara, look out!" Mark's voice echoed through the chamber, and she didn't need to turn around to know that the creature was closing in on her. In desperation, Lara placed her hand on the altar, her breath shallow and rapid. She felt a surge of energy course through her body, and a strange warmth filled the chamber. It was as though the earth itself was responding to her touch, but it was too much to comprehend. The creature was almost upon her now, its claws outstretched. But just before it could strike, the energy from the altar erupted in a brilliant flash of light. The force sent the creature stumbling backward, its body writhing in pain as the light consumed it. For a brief moment, everything went still. The ground stopped shaking, and the chamber fell silent, save for the faint hum of the altar. Lara, breathless and disoriented, stood up slowly, staring in disbelief at the creature. It was writhing in agony, its body contorting in unnatural ways as if the light had burned through it. But it wasn't dead. Instead, it was weakening, its strength fading with each passing second. "It's not over yet," Lara whispered to herself, her heart racing. The altar had done something, it had repelled the creature temporarily, but it wasn't a permanent solution. They needed to figure out how to use this energy to stop it for good. Mark and the others had gathered behind her, eyes wide with shock. "What just happened?" Mark asked. "I don't know," Lara replied, still trying to catch her breath. "But that altar is connected to the power under the earth. Somehow, it repelled the creature, but it's not enough. We have to figure out what this is, and how to use it before the creature regains its strength." The team huddled together, the threat of the creature still looming over them. But now, they had a sliver of hope. They had seen what this ancient power could do, and they knew it was their only chance to stop the Earth's destruction. But there was one problem, they still didn't understand the energy fully. And the creature was only getting stronger. "We need answers," Lara said firmly. "And we need them fast." As the energy from the altar continued to hum around them, Lara realized that the battle was far from over. They had just uncovered a tiny fraction of the Earth's hidden secrets. And as they stood there, waiting for the next move, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The chamber was thick with tension. The creature's grotesque form twitched, its claws scraping against the ground in futile attempts to rise. Its once fiery eyes now flickered with uncertainty, but Lara could see the raw power still thrumming beneath its surface. The team had only bought themselves a momentary reprieve, nothing more. The true battle was just beginning. Lara stood at the altar, her heart racing as she watched the creature struggle to regain its strength. The hum of energy still resonated in the air, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to align with the very core of the earth itself. She couldn't fully understand it yet, but she knew one thing: this energy, whatever it was, had the power to stop the creature. "What exactly did you do, Lara?" Mark asked, his voice hushed. He and the others were crouched behind the stone formations that dotted the chamber, their eyes fixed on the creature. It was struggling, but it wasn't defeated. "Not yet." "I touched the altar," Lara replied, her gaze never leaving the creature. "It's more than just an ancient artifact. It's a conduit, a link to something deeper beneath us." "But how do you know that?" Mark questioned. Lara took a deep breath. "I don't know. It's like a feeling, a pull. The symbols, the energy, it's like the earth is calling to me." She paused, thinking for a moment. "We need to figure out what it's really doing. If we can unlock its full potential, we might be able to destroy the creature." The others exchanged uneasy glances. The creature, now on its feet, let out another spine-chilling roar. It wasn't retreating. It was enraged. It had felt the power of the altar and it wanted revenge. "We can't stay here forever," one of the team members, Mia, said nervously. "We need a way to keep it at bay while we figure this out." Lara's mind was already working overtime. The team was running out of options. The creature was stronger than anything they had. Lara could feel the ground beneath her tremble, a faint but unmistakable vibration that seemed to echo the growing chaos in the air. The creatures were closing in, moving swiftly across the cavernous landscape, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. They had been awakened, and now there was no turning back. As Lara's team huddled together, she could hear their shallow breaths, the sound of their fear mingling with the rumbling of the earth. The weight of the situation was pressing down on them, yet there was something else in Lara's chest, something unfamiliar. A flicker of hope, perhaps, or maybe just the will to survive. Whatever it was, it pushed her forward, toward the altar. "The energy," she whispered to herself. "I can feel it. It's shifting. It's growing stronger." Mark and the others had been watching her closely. They were waiting for her to give direction. She could see the anxiety in their eyes. They weren't just afraid for themselves, they were afraid for humanity. For the world they had always known. "We can't let them take this planet," Lara said, her voice firm but laced with urgency. "We have to fight back." Mia was crouched behind one of the stone formations, peering out into the growing darkness. "How, Lara? We don't have any weapons. We don't even know what we're dealing with." Lara nodded, acknowledging the gravity of her words. They were unarmed, outnumbered, and facing a foe they barely understood. But there was still hope in the earth beneath them. She could feel it pulsing with life, as if the planet itself was fighting back against the creatures. "I don't have all the answers," she said, her voice steadying. "But I know this: whatever power is in the altar, we need to unlock it. If we can harness it, we can stop them. At least, long enough to turn the tide." The creatures were drawing closer. They had sensed the group's movement and were reacting with increasing aggression. Lara's heart raced as the energy in the air grew thicker, more palpable. It was like the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for the team to act. "Get ready," Lara called out, her hands trembling as they hovered just above the altar once more. The symbols on the surface flickered in response, growing brighter with every heartbeat. Lara knew that this was the moment, the moment that could change everything. The team gathered around her, each of them watching as she tried to focus on the energy once again. Her fingertips brushed the symbols, sending a wave of energy up her arms. It was a force so strong that it nearly knocked the wind out of her. But this time, Lara didn't shy away. She leaned into it, trying to understand it, to become one with it. Suddenly, the altar flared to life. The light was blinding, its energy radiating outward like the sun rising over a dark horizon. Lara felt herself being pulled into it, the force of the power nearly overwhelming. But she didn't fight it. She embraced it. "Hold on," she shouted to the team, her voice barely audible over the crackling energy. "I think I've unlocked it. This is our chance." The team had no choice but to trust her. With Lara at the center, the energy from the altar surged into the earth, sending shockwaves through the ground. The entire cavern shook as if it was coming to life, the stones rattling and groaning as if the planet itself was stirring from a long slumber. And then, it happened. The creatures, once so unstoppable, began to falter. The energy from the altar was coursing through the earth, making the very ground beneath their feet a weapon. The invaders' movements slowed, their once perfect coordination disjointed and erratic. The force that had once felt so overwhelming was now being turned against them. "They're weakening," Mark exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's working." But Lara knew that this was only the beginning. The creatures were powerful, far more so than they had anticipated. The altar's energy was giving them a fighting chance, but it was a fragile one. "We need to keep this up," Lara said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "If we lose focus, we lose everything." Just then, a new sound filled the air, a deep, rumbling growl that came from the depths of the cavern. It was different from the roars of the creatures. This was something more primal, more dangerous. Lara's heart skipped a beat as a massive figure emerged from the shadows. It was unlike any creature they had encountered so far. Its massive body was covered in jagged armor, its eyes glowing with a deadly intensity. This was no mere scout or warrior, it was the leader, the mastermind behind the invasion. The team froze, their eyes locked on the creature as it advanced. There was no mistaking its power. It was the final challenge, the one that could tip the scales in favor of the invaders if they failed to stop it. "We can't let it get to the altar," Lara said, her voice tight with fear and resolve. "We have to hold it off. Everyone, stay together." Mark and the others moved into position, weapons drawn, their faces set with determination. But Lara knew that this battle was not going to be won with firepower alone. The key to victory lay in the energy beneath them, the power that the earth had been hiding for centuries. As the leader charged toward them, Lara raised her hand toward the altar, focusing every ounce of energy she could muster. The light from the symbols grew brighter, more intense. The ground beneath them rumbled in response, as if the earth itself was answering her call. "Please," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Please work." The leader of the invaders was nearly upon them. Lara's hand shot out, and with a final, desperate push, she released the full force of the energy stored within the altar. The earth shook violently, the light blinding them all as it surged outward. The leader screamed, a horrible, guttural sound, as the energy struck it. The creature's body jerked and twisted, its armor cracking under the force. The light was consuming it, breaking it apart piece by piece. And then, with one final, ear-splitting roar, the creature collapsed to the ground, its body disintegrating into nothingness. The cavern fell silent. The light from the altar dimmed, its power spent. The ground beneath them stilled, and the rumbling ceased. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was peace. But the battle wasn't over. The team had only won one fight in a much larger war. They were far from safe. "Is it over?" Mia asked, her voice trembling as she looked around the now silent cavern. Lara stood tall, her body aching from the energy she had just exerted. She knew the truth, they had only just begun to understand the depths of the power they had tapped into. There was more to the Earth's secrets than they could ever imagine. And they would need to uncover every part of it if they were to survive the coming storms. "Not yet," Lara said, her voice firm. "But we've taken the first step." The cavern was still, but the tension in the air was palpable. Lara stood over the crumpled remains of the leader, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The light from the altar had dimmed, but its energy still thrummed in the ground beneath them, faint but steady. It was as though the earth itself had exhausted all it could give, and now it was waiting, watching. Lara's eyes scanned the scene. The team was on edge, but they had pulled through, together. Mark and the others were huddled around her, still processing the victory they had just achieved. The shock of what they had done, what they had unleashed, was evident on their faces. But it wasn't over. They knew that. "Is anyone hurt?" Lara asked, looking to each of them, her voice steady but filled with concern. Mia was the first to speak, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped blood from her brow. "We're all okay, for now." Mark, always the stoic one, gave a small nod. "But this battle isn't over, Lara. That was just one creature. There are more out there, and they know we're here." Lara's heart sank. Mark was right. As much as they had won a major battle, it had come at a cost. And now, they were facing the terrifying reality that the invaders were not a single-minded swarm, they were organized, strategic, and they had a leader. The loss of one might not slow them down for long. "There's no time to waste," Lara said, her voice hardening with determination. "We've got to move." But as she turned toward the exit of the cavern, a sudden, sharp noise filled the air, a sound like the crackling of static, followed by a low hum that grew louder by the second. The ground beneath them began to tremble again, only this time, it wasn't the natural rumble they had grown used to. This was something else, something artificial. "What is that?" Mia gasped, her eyes wide. Lara froze, her hand outstretched as she searched the shadows. The hum grew louder, more insistent. And then, the sound was joined by something else, voices. Echoing voices, deep and guttural, speaking a language they didn't understand. Before anyone could react, a bright light flashed from the entrance of the cavern, blinding them all. Lara shielded her eyes, instinctively pulling the others behind her. And then, through the light, a figure emerged. It was humanoid, but not human. Its skin was an odd, metallic silver, reflecting the light around it like polished steel. Its eyes were deep, glowing with an unnatural light, and its movements were deliberate, controlled. This was no mere scout. This was something far more dangerous, another leader, perhaps, or something worse. "It's not over," Lara whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. The metallic figure raised one hand, and the voices in the cavern grew louder. The sound was now a chorus of strange, alien languages, overlapping and resonating like a terrible symphony. The earth beneath them trembled, and for a moment, Lara thought they might be swallowed whole by the force of it. But the metallic figure did not advance. Instead, it stood in the entrance of the cavern, watching them, its expression unreadable. The team's weapons were drawn, but Lara knew they were useless against such an enemy. They had no idea who, or what, this being was. "Who are you?" Lara called out, her voice echoing in the cavern. Her heart was racing, her mind spinning. Was this the end of their struggle? Had they simply woken the next wave of invaders? The metallic figure didn't respond with words. Instead, it raised its hand once more, and suddenly, the entire cavern seemed to come alive. The walls shifted, the very ground beneath their feet moved as though it were shifting in response to the alien presence. Lara's heart skipped a beat as she realized the truth. It wasn't just the creatures they were fighting. It was the planet itself. The energy in the ground, the power that had been pulsing through the earth for so long, was not simply a defense mechanism against the creatures. It had been waiting for something. Waiting for this very moment. And this metallic figure, this alien being, was its key. "It's not over," Lara repeated, her voice full of dread. But this time, she wasn't just speaking about the invaders. She was speaking about the larger truth they had uncovered. There were forces at play here that were beyond anything they could have imagined. Forces that not only affected Earth but the very fabric of the galaxy itself. "We need to get out of here," Mark said, his voice tight with urgency. Lara shook her head, her eyes never leaving the metallic figure. "No. We need to figure out what it wants. We need to understand who, or what, it is." Suddenly, a deep voice filled the cavern, not from the metallic figure, but from the air itself. It resonated in the walls, reverberated through their bones. It was a voice of power, of ancient authority. "You have awakened the Guardians," the voice said, its tone low and imposing. "Now, you must face the consequences." Lara's heart froze. The Guardians. The words echoed in her mind. This wasn't just about saving Earth. This was about something far greater, something that had been slumbering beneath the surface of the planet for centuries. It had been waiting for humanity to unlock its secrets, to tap into its power. And now, it had come to collect. Consequences? Mia whispered, her voice shaky. "What does that mean?" Before Lara could respond, the metallic figure raised its hand once more, and the light in the cavern intensified. The ground beneath them cracked open, revealing a deep, glowing chasm, an abyss that seemed to stretch into eternity. "This is the beginning," the voice said. "The beginning of your trial." The metallic figure took a step forward, and the ground shifted again, opening a path toward the chasm. A path they would have no choice but to follow if they wanted to survive. Lara turned to the team, her expression resolute. They had no choice but to press forward. There was no turning back. They were on the verge of uncovering the Earth's greatest secret, a secret that could either save humanity or lead to its destruction. "We have to go," she said. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." The ground trembled violently as Lara and the team approached the glowing chasm. The walls of the cavern seemed to pulse with life, as if the very earth itself was alive and watching them. The metallic figure loomed before them, its glowing eyes fixed on Lara, its expression unreadable. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with an ancient power that felt almost tangible. "Are you ready?" Mark asked, his voice quiet but firm. His eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and determination. The weight of their situation was not lost on him. This was it, the final test. Lara swallowed, her throat dry. They had come so far. They had uncovered Earth's deadly secrets, faced unimaginable horrors, and unlocked forces beyond their comprehension. But the question remained, what now? What would happen when they stepped into the abyss before them? And more importantly, what was this final trial? As the metallic figure raised its hand once more, the voices from earlier echoed through the cavern, now clearer than ever before. The words were foreign, alien, but this time, Lara could feel them deep within her bones. They were not just speaking, they were communicating directly with her mind, probing her very thoughts. "You have awakened us," the voice echoed, its tone almost reverential. "But awakening comes with consequences. The path you now face will either free your world or doom it. This is your trial. This is your choice." Lara felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the chasm. The darkness within it seemed to stretch endlessly, pulling at her, calling to her in ways she couldn't quite explain. This was no ordinary trial. This was something cosmic, something ancient, and it was asking them to make a decision that could alter the fate of not just Earth, but the universe itself. The metallic figure stepped forward, raising its hand to the chasm, and the walls of the cavern began to shift, revealing hidden symbols, glowing with a faint blue light. They seemed to move, rearranging themselves in a complex pattern, a puzzle they were meant to solve. Lara took a deep breath. She didn't know what awaited them at the end of this path, but she knew they had to face it head-on. There was no turning back. Not now. "We do this together," she said, turning to her team. "No one gets left behind." Mia nodded, her face set with determination. Mark gave her a steady look of resolve. They had fought through too much already. They had come this far. The stakes were high, but they were ready. Lara stepped forward, her heart racing as she moved toward the chasm. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the ground beneath them trembled again, and the air grew thick with energy. The walls of the cavern seemed to close in, the path ahead growing narrower with each step. The metallic figure spoke again, its voice echoing through the cavern. "You seek knowledge, but knowledge is a double-edged sword. To wield it is to bear its weight. The trial will reveal your true intentions." The symbols on the walls flashed brighter, and suddenly, a blinding light enveloped them. The team was forced to shield their eyes, but Lara could feel the energy in the air, crackling with a raw intensity. It was as if the very fabric of reality was bending, shifting around them. When the light finally dimmed, Lara found herself standing at the edge of a vast, swirling void. It was as if they had crossed into another realm, one that existed outside time and space. The air was heavy with the weight of centuries, and a deep hum resonated in the distance, as though the very core of the universe was vibrating with power. Before them stood a massive figure, cloaked in shadow. It was neither human nor alien. It was something beyond comprehension, a being that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Its presence was overwhelming, and Lara could feel its gaze, cold, calculating, and ancient, settling on her. "You have come far," the figure said, its voice like the rumbling of a distant storm. "But now, you must prove yourselves worthy." Lara swallowed hard. "Worthy of what?" she asked, her voice steady despite the overwhelming presence of the figure. "Worthy of the power you seek," the figure replied. "Worthy of the knowledge you have awakened. Only those who prove their strength, their resolve, and their true intentions may unlock the secrets you seek. Only then will you have the power to decide the fate of your world." Lara's heart raced as she realized the truth. This wasn't just about surviving. This wasn't about defeating invaders or solving puzzles. This was about the nature of humanity itself, its flaws, its strengths, its desires. They had to prove they were worthy to wield the power they had unleashed, to determine whether Earth would survive the trials of the universe. "You must choose," the figure continued. "What is more important to you, knowledge or power? The fate of your world rests in your hands. The decision is yours." Lara closed her eyes, the weight of the choice bearing down on her. She thought of everything they had been through, the destruction, the sacrifice, the lives lost along the way. She thought of the people back home, of the world they were fighting for. They couldn't afford to fail. And then, something clicked within her. It wasn't about knowledge or power. It was about humanity, their resilience, their capacity for compassion, and their drive to survive. It was the strength to overcome the darkness, to rise above the odds, and to protect what mattered most. "We choose humanity," Lara said, her voice clear and unwavering. The figure was silent for a moment, as if considering her words. Then, it nodded, its presence shifting, as though acknowledging the decision.